Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Really glad you're joining us today. We're plunging into a topic that's, well, it's not just interesting, it's absolutely fundamental to being human. It's really about how we interact with the world, how we survive, how we thrive, how we change over time. And this particular deep dive, it actually comes straight from an amazing collection of sources you, our listeners, shared. We got articles, research papers, some personal notes too, and they all seem to circle around this really powerful concept we're going to call human tools.
That's right. Yeah, at the absolute heart of these sources is this core phenomenon. It's universal. We're calling it human agency and adaptation through tool-mediated interaction. Quite a mouthful, I know.
Right.
But just think of it as maybe the engine of human progress, or frankly, just existence. It's that inherent human thing, right? You look at the world, you see a need, maybe a challenge. Could be hunger, could be needing shelter, maybe just wanting to understand the stars. And then you actively try to figure out a way to meet that need.
And the way we meet it is through tools. But like you said, these sources are really pushing us, aren't they? To think way beyond just, hammers and wrenches.
Oh, absolutely. The definition of tool we're working with here is incredibly broad. It's not just the hammer, not just your smartphone. It's really anything we create or use to interact with or modify or even just understand our environment and ourselves. You perceive a need, you conceive or grab a tool, you interact with the world through it, you experience what happens, and then you learn, you adapt. That whole loop, that's absolutely key.
Yeah. So our mission then for this dive is to unpack what your sources reveal about this fundamental human loop. We'll explore how tools, in this really broad sense, shape literally every corner of our lives. We'll uncover some maybe surprising connections from biology, philosophy, even math, and then tackle that big question. What happens when something like AI, this profoundly powerful new tool, enters this ancient human process? It feels universal, right? Relevant to your life, listening right now, whatever your background.
Let's maybe slow down just a touch and really lay out that core concept again. Human agency and adaptation through tool-mediated interactions. So it's about us, humans. That's the agency part, actively seeing needs, seeing challenges, and then changing or being changed. That's the adaptation. By using these things we call tools to engage with the world. That's the interaction. And
right.
Like you said, that definition of tool is probably the first really big insight from these sources. It's just so much broader than we usually think. I mean, yes, we have physical tools, obviously. That's the easy part. Everything from, a sharpened stick way back when to the wheel, complex machines, computers, the internet today. They extend our physical reach, our capabilities.
Makes sense.
But then, crucially, there are the conceptual tools. These are like the abstract frameworks, the systems, the methods we use. They help us organize our thoughts, communicate, solve problems, understand the world. Language itself is probably the most fundamental one, wouldn't you say?
Definitely.
And then you've got math, logic, the scientific method, legal systems, economic theories, philosophical ideas, even art forms like music or painting. Social structures, belief systems too, they all act as these conceptual tools. They give us frameworks for how we interact with reality and with each other.
Wow, okay. That's a lot.
And maybe the most surprising part, as the sources point out, is how aspects of our own biology and genetics seem to have been shaped by tool use. So they've kind of become preconditions, or maybe even tools themselves. It's a fascinating feedback loop. Gene culture coevolution.
Gene culture coevolution.
Okay. Think about our evolved brains, the dexterity of our hands standing upright, which freed up those hands. These probably weren't just, happy accidents that happened before we started using tools. The very act of using tools, especially complex stuff like making fire or early implements, likely put selective pressure on our ancestors. It favored those with traits better suited for it. So our biology, in a very real sense, became a tool-using tool, shaped by the whole process.
That biological part is.
Yeah.
That's kind of mind-blowing. It really shifts the perspective, doesn't it? It's not just humans use tools. It's more like tools helped make us human.
Right.
So a hammer is physical, algebra is conceptual, and even my hand structure is, in a way, biological, refined by using other tools. That makes this concept feel incredibly deep. It really gets at what it fundamentally means to be human.
Exactly. And the reason this whole thing is universal, why it applies to everyone, everywhere, is because it's tied to those really deep-seated human drivers, the need to survive, the need to understand, to connect, to express ourselves, to alleviate suffering, find meaning, find fulfillment. Tools are basically our primary way of engaging with all of that, all those fundamental parts of the human condition.
Okay. Got it. So now let's really try to unpack this. Let's see how this idea of tool-mediated interaction actually shows up in your life, listener, and, well, everything around us. Maybe instead of just listing examples, we can look at some key insights about the impact of tools that really jumped out from the sources you sent.
Good idea.
First off, just the sheer pervasiveness. I mean, look around you right now. Almost everything you see, everything you interact with is either a tool or it's a product of tools, or it's somehow mediated by tools. The chair you're sitting on, the device you're listening to this on, the clothes you're wearing, the language we're speaking right now, the road outside. It's all part of this vast human tool ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. And this system has a profound impact, obviously, on our basic existence. Just think about survival. Tools like fire, agriculture, medicine, sanitation systems. These aren't just minor conveniences. They've completely redefined the human lifespan, our security, compared to our ancestors before these tools.
Right. Huge difference. And beyond just surviving, tools are absolutely central to comfort, to convenience.
Mm-hmm.
Heating, cooling systems, complex transport networks, digital entertainment platforms, they've transformed daily life. They've really raised the bar for what we consider normal or easy.
But here's where it gets, well, maybe a bit more complicated and really interesting: the power dynamics. Tools are so often intrinsically linked to power and control. It's unavoidable, it seems. Think about weapons, surveillance technologies, control over information, complex financial instruments. They can create massive imbalances. They establish hierarchies that become sources of conflict. That's woven all through history, and it's absolutely true today.
Yeah, definitely see that. And connection too, right? Communication tools. I mean, writing, the printing press, the internet.
Yeah.
They connect us across unimaginable distances.
Yeah.
But the sources also point out that double-edged sword nature, don't they?
They do.
These same tools can isolate us in our own little echo chambers. They can spread misinformation like wildfire or create new kinds of social anxiety. It's a crucial insight, I think, that tools seem to amplify both the good and the bad in human nature.
Exactly. And these tools, they don't just shape our present moment, they actually shape our perception of time itself and history.
Yeah.
Human history is essentially the story of tools. We define eras by them: Stone Age, Bronze Age, Information Age. And tools like, say, fast transport or the internet, they compress our experience of time, don't they? The world feels smaller, faster. And then on a cosmic scale, tools like telescopes let us look back billions of years, extending our perception of time in a completely different way.
Wow.
And building on that biological connection we talked about earlier, another really deep insight from the sources is how tools don't just interact with our biology. They've literally helped shape it over evolutionary time. We mentioned gene culture coevolution, like how cooking with fire, a tool, probably impacted our digestive systems, maybe even our brain size.
Right, right. And that idea from biology, the extended phenotype, how genes influence things outside the organism, like a spider's web or a beaver's dam. Human tools feel like the ultimate example of that. Our tools are like extensions of our biological drives, just reshaping the entire planet to meet our needs: shelter, food, resources.
Absolutely. And this whole tool-mediated interaction thing, it's not just practical or biological. It fundamentally structures how we think, how we understand reality. Well, consider philosophy. Tools are absolutely core to epistemology. That's the study of knowledge, right? How we know what we know. Scientific instruments are obvious tools for observation, but conceptual tools like logic, mathematics, language itself, those are the very instruments we use to build arguments, to grasp at truth.
Okay. And tools constantly bring up ethical dilemmas, don't they? You mentioned the knife healing or harm.
Exactly.
Nuclear tech power versus existential risk. AI obviously presents hugely complex ethical questions right now. And the sources seem to highlight that our attempts to navigate these dilemmas often involve creating other tools, conceptual ones like ethical frameworks, laws, regulations.
Precisely. It's tools addressing the consequences of other tools, in a way. Even metaphysics, the study of the fundamental nature of reality, gets influenced by our tools. Our understanding of the universe has been just radically altered by observational tools, right? Microscopes, particle accelerators. They've led to ideas like quantum physics that just completely defy our everyday intuition, which was shaped by the macroscopic tools we evolved with.
That's fascinating.
Physics and math are also great examples here. Physics uses experimental tools and mathematical tools to describe the universe, and its discoveries often yield new physical tools. And mathematics itself, well, it's arguably the supreme conceptual tool. It's this language of patterns, of relationships, that we can apply across so many different fields. its internal structure, its rules, are a tool for logical deduction, for problem solving.
And logic itself.
Logic feels like maybe the most foundational conceptual tool of all. It's the framework for coherent thought, for building theories, for creating other complex tools, including computer code.
It really does seem to touch absolutely everything. The sources even get into how tools affect our state of mind.
Oh, absolutely. Think about emotional tools. Art, music, literature. They function not just for communication or aesthetics, but really to evoke emotions, to regulate them, to explore them both for the creator and the audience. Social media can be a tool for connection, sure, but also a source of anxiety comparison. Chemical tools like drugs obviously alter consciousness. Even practices like meditation can be seen as conceptual or mental tools for cultivating specific states of mind. And our cognitive tools are constantly evolving too. Language structures how we think. Writing lets us externalize knowledge, preserve it. Computers, digital interfaces, they're augmenting our cognitive abilities right now, changing how we process information, maybe even how we think.
And belief systems, religions, ideologies.
They act as incredibly powerful conceptual tools. They provide frameworks for meaning, for moral guidance, for social cohesion. And within those systems, you find specific tools, rituals, sacred texts, symbols that help reinforce those beliefs and guide people's actions.
Okay. What about on the individual level?
Well, tool mastery is incredibly empowering, isn't it? Learning to use complex software, mastering a musical instrument, becoming skilled with, say, surgical tools. This gives people agency, it increases their capability, it can even become a core part of someone's identity, their social status.
But like you mentioned earlier, there's that dependency side too.
Exactly.
We rely so heavily on electricity, the internet, complex supply chains. When those tool systems get disrupted, the consequences can be massive.
Yeah.
Which kind of brings us to how the world itself reacts to all this human tool use.
Yeah, there's this constant cycle. There's adoption and innovation, obviously. People embrace new tools. But the sources also point out there's always been resistance, historically and today. Think of the Luddites smashing machines during the Industrial Revolution. Or think about the anxieties swirling around AI right now. New tools can disrupt economies, shake up social structures, shift power dynamics. That naturally leads to fear, sometimes conflict.
So societies try to manage that.
They do, often by creating more conceptual tools, laws, regulations, international treaties, trying to govern the use of powerful technologies, mitigate the negative impacts. And of course, the environmental impact is just undeniable. Tools have allowed us to harness resources, build civilizations on an unprecedented scale, but often with really significant, sometimes devastating consequences for the planet. That's a huge part of the reaction.
Okay, let's maybe pivot slightly and turn to some specific questions in areas that really stood out in the source material you sent us, listener. See how they fit into this whole framework. For instance, art as a tool. We touched on it, but how else did the sources see it functioning?
Well, beyond just emotional expression, the sources highlighted art's role as a tool for social cohesion. Think about shared cultural stories, national anthems, community murals, ceremonies. It can also be a powerful tool for social critique, for challenging norms, questioning power structures. It helps us make sense of complex human experiences, beauty, suffering, love, loss. It can be a tool for healing, too, personal or collective, providing catharsis, solace.
Okay. What about something maybe more practical sounding, like human struggles, war, famine, and how they impact supply chains?
It is practical, but looking at it through this lens, you see it's really about the fragility of our complex tool systems. Supply chains are these incredibly intricate networks, right? They involve conceptual tools, economic models, logistics planning, physical tools, ships, trucks, warehouses. Communication tools,
Right.
Human struggles, conflict, pandemics, political instability, they disrupt these networks. Conflict destroys infrastructure, physical tools. A pandemic impacts labor, the human tools within the system. Political issues disrupt trade agreements, conceptual tools. And the result is a breakdown in the overall system that uses all these tools to deliver goods and services. It highlights the interdependence.
That makes sense.
The sources also really dug into the complex role of things like, well, drugs, alcohol, sex, greed, lies, truth, life, faith. How do they fit in? They aren't neat categories, but they relate in different ways. Sometimes as motivators for tool use, sometimes as consequences of it, sometimes even as tools themselves.
So. Give it a go.
Okay, take drugs and alcohol. They're chemical tools, basically, that alter our state of mind, often used maybe to escape or cope. but they have significant potential for misuse, negative consequences that then impact our ability to use other tools effectively. Our jobs, our relationships.
Right.
Or think about sex. It's a biological drive, sure, but it involves complex social and emotional tools for relating to others, communication, consent, cultural norms about relationships. And its misuse can absolutely be a tool for exerting power or causing harm.
Okay. And greed.
Greed is a powerful motivator. It can drive incredible innovation, the creation of really powerful tools for accumulating wealth, but it can also drive exploitation, the misuse of tools for unfair gain, disregard for consequences.
And lies versus truth.
That relates directly to language and information, our fundamental communication tools. A lie is basically a deliberate misuse of those tools for manipulation. While truthful information, honest communication, those are essential conceptual tools for building trust, for making functional societies possible.
What a life and faith.
Well, life itself is often seen as the ultimate state that our tools aim to preserve or enhance or understand. Medicine, agriculture, science. And faith often acts as a broad conceptual tool, providing frameworks for meaning, hope, moral guidance. And it uses its own specific tools within that system, like rituals or sacred texts.
It sounds like humans get more out of tools than just their, basic function, too. There's something else going on.
Oh, absolutely. Beyond just meeting a need, there's a deep satisfaction that comes from skillful tool use, right? A sense of mastery, creative expression. The sources note that even seemingly simple tools can offer a path to identity or social status through craftsmanship or expertise. Think of a master carpenter or a skilled musician.
Yeah.
And our emotions, laughter, sorrow, anger, they're often reactions, aren't they? Reactions to how tools, or the lack of them, impact our goals, our values, our relationships. Laughter can even function as a social bonding tool, reinforcing group norms, maybe relieving tension. Anger can be a perfectly justified response to the misuse of power tools that leads to injustice.
And human concentration, that came up too.
Yes. The sources highlight concentration, that focused mental energy, as a vital mental tool. We need it to engage with the world, to effectively use all these other tools.
Huh. Never thought of concentration as a tool itself.
But it is, isn't it? It's directed by our needs and desires. We concentrate to learn a skill because we need a job or because we want to create something beautiful. It's absolutely essential for mastering any complex tool, whether it's a surgical scalpel or writing intricate code. You need that focus.
Okay, so we have this incredibly long, deep history of human tool use, shaping pretty much everything. Now, let's bring in the big new player, AI, artificial intelligence. The sources really introduce AI as this profoundly powerful, maybe fundamentally different new type of tool entering this ancient process.
Yes, exactly. And maybe one of the most significant insights here is the fundamental difference in how humans and current AI understand or interact with tools and the world. Human understanding is, well, it's embodied, isn't it? It's intuitive. It's built through physical interaction, through cultural context, through a whole lifetime of experience. We learn about a hammer by picking it up, feeling its weight, swinging it, seeing what happens. It's tied deeply to our senses, our emotions, our intentions.
Right. Learned helplessness with a tricky IKEA project.
Exactly. Whereas AI's understanding, at least as it stands today, is data-driven. It's algorithmic. It learns patterns from these massive data sets of human-generated information, text, images, code about tools, their functions, their history. It can process correlations. It can predict outcomes with incredible speed and accuracy sometimes. But it lacks genuine embodied experience. It lacks consciousness, intrinsic intent. It simulates understanding based on the data it was trained on.
Okay, so given that pretty fundamental difference, how can AI, this data-driven tool, actually help us understand human tools or ourselves better?
The sources suggest it definitely can, but primarily as a powerful analytical tool. It can process and identify patterns in vast data sets related to tool use, things like efficiency, adoption rates, social impacts, environmental consequences on a scale that's just impossible for humans alone.
Okay, so pattern recognition on a massive scale.
Exactly. It can run complex simulations too, model the potential impacts of new tools before we deploy them, or model system-wide changes. AI could potentially personalize education, making it easier for individuals to learn the skills needed to use complex tools effectively. It might help design more intuitive interfaces, making tools easier to learn and use for everyone. Accessibility is a big potential benefit. And of course, AI itself can accelerate scientific discovery, which leads to new knowledge, which then enables the creation of entirely new types of tools. It's a cycle.
And the sources mentioned AI making life easier or maybe helping us feel good.
Yes, it can contribute. Automation can certainly relieve tedious or dangerous tasks. AI assistants can help manage information overload. Personalized wellness tools, mental health apps, fitness trackers, they can offer support.
But I sense a but.
Well, yeah. The sources are quite clear. Aiming for feeling good all the time isn't really the point of AI, and frankly, it's not a realistic human role anyway. Life involves struggle. AI is a tool that could potentially reduce certain kinds of suffering, maybe enhance some aspects of well-being, but real fulfillment, that seems to involve complexity, challenge, meaning that we derive from our own agency, our own efforts, our relationships.
So beware the Wall-E scenario.
Perhaps. The key idea is being mindful of potential dependency. The goal should be AI augmenting human capabilities, helping us make wiser use of tools rather than replacing the human effort needed for genuine understanding and, well, living a full life.
So what do we humans really need to know about AI within this whole big picture of tools? What's essential?
I think a core takeaway from the sources is the need for critical tool literacy, especially with something as powerful as AI. We need to understand, at least conceptually, how these tools work. We need to recognize their limitations, be aware of how they can shape our perceptions, our decisions. The sources really emphasize being aware of potential biases baked into the data AI is trained on. That's crucial.
Understanding the black box, or at least knowing it is a black box sometimes.
Exactly. Understanding AI's capabilities versus its fundamental lack of consciousness or genuine human experience is also key. It's pattern matching, not feeling. And adaptability. The landscape of tools is shifting faster than ever, largely driven by AI innovation. So the ability to learn, adapt, reskill, that's going to be paramount for individuals and societies.
And that question of who benefits, that must come up strongly with AI.
Oh, absolutely. History shows that those who control the most powerful tools often gain disproportionate advantage. It's a recurring theme. So for AI to be a force for broad societal benefit, the sources really highlight the critical need for thinking about equitable access and really careful, intentional governance and management. It won't happen automatically.
Okay. The sources also touched on AI and some really big philosophical questions like, can AI help us figure out fundamental truths like life is all there is? That specific phrase came up.
Right. AI can certainly analyze scientific data related to biology, cosmology, neuroscience. It can summarize philosophical arguments for naturalism or materialism. It can point to the lack of empirical evidence for, non-physical phenomena that might be discussed in the sources. So in that sense, it can be a powerful tool for accessing and organizing information relevant to these deep questions.
But it can't give us the answer.
Well, the sources seem to suggest that belief on these fundamental existential questions often goes beyond just logic or data. It involves personal experience, intuition, maybe faith for some. AI can provide information to inform our beliefs, maybe challenge them, but it can't replace that deeply personal human journey of confronting mortality or the ultimate nature of existence. It doesn't have existence in the same way.
What about something darker, like cruelty? How does that fit with tools?
The sources tend to view cruel acts, like using violence against someone, as a kind of perversion of tool use. It's taking a tool, often a weapon, which is designed specifically to amplify physical force, and using it for purely destructive intent. That intent is driven by human factors, lack of empathy, ideology, maybe pathology. The tool just magnifies the user's intent, whatever that intent might be, good or bad. So the cruelty isn't inherent in the tool itself, but in the human user's intent and their lack of moral guidance, which is then amplified by the tool.
That's a crucial distinction. So is understanding this whole concept we're discussing, human agency and adaptation through tool-mediated interaction, is that just another belief system itself?
That's a fair question. The sources seem to frame it less as a fixed belief you have to accept and more as a process of gaining knowledge, gaining skill, gaining awareness. It's about understanding a fundamental dynamic of human existence based on observation. Now, this understanding can definitely inform our beliefs about progress, responsibility, the need for ethical tech development, but the understanding itself is presented more like an evolving insight drawn from looking at human history and behavior.
Okay.
And, that question about laughter that came up in the sources, why people laugh at different things, that's a fantastic example of human understanding that AI currently struggles with, right?
Yeah, AI humor is famously bad.
Because humor relies so heavily on deeply ingrained cultural context, shared experiences, personal history, that intuitive pattern recognition spotting absurdity or incongruity. We process all that through our unique human cognitive and emotional tool sets built up over a lifetime of embodied social experience. AI can analyze data about what people find funny, sure, but it doesn't have that lived human context to truly get the joke or generate humor organically the way humans do. It mimics.
Right.
And finally, the sources emphasize how circumstances and intuition are key drivers in tool use and innovation. Our environment, our needs, our cultural context, they shape which tools get developed and which ones become important. A society in a harsh climate will prioritize tools for shelter and warmth, obviously. And intuition, that sort of rapid, often subconscious pattern recognition based on experience, that's crucial for both using tools skillfully, getting a feel for it, and for those creative leaps needed to invent totally new tools. AI can simulate pattern recognition incredibly well, but it lacks that human intuitive gut feeling that guides so much of our interaction with the world and with our tools.
Okay. So yeah, summing up that AI versus human understanding piece, it really underscores the core difference, I think. Human understanding is rich, it's embodied, intuitive, emotional, deeply contextual. AI understanding is powerful, yes, but currently it's data-driven, it's algorithmic, it lacks embodiment, and its goals are set externally by its creators or users. AI simulates, it doesn't experience.
So given all that, what does this mean for us looking forward? What kind of improvements or ways to maybe mitigate the potential downsides, especially with powerful new tools like AI? What did the sources suggest there?
They proposed a few key approaches, kind of a multi-pronged strategy. First, building ethical frameworks by design. Actively thinking about and integrating ethical considerations right from the very start of tool development, not just as an afterthought. Especially crucial for something like AI.
Okay, makes sense. What else? Second, fostering education for critical tool literacy. Basically teaching people how to analyze the tools they use every day, understanding their purpose, their impact, their potential for manipulation or bias. That's seen as essential for navigating a world just saturated with tools.
We need to be smarter users.
Exactly. Then, promoting transparency and explainability, particularly for complex algorithmic tools like AI. We need to have some understanding, even if it's high level, of how they reach their conclusions. Avoid the magic black box feeling where possible. Also, encouraging interdisciplinary collaboration. Bringing together diverse perspectives, technologists, ethicists, social scientists, artists, historians, philosophers, to shape tool development and really understand its broad impact, not just leaving it to the engineers.
Get more people in the room.
Right, and ensuring equitable access and co-creation. Working actively to make sure the benefits of powerful new tools are shared widely, not just concentrated, and including diverse voices in the design process itself. And finally, continuous monitoring and adaptation. Recognizing that the impact of tools isn't static, it evolves. So we need ongoing assessment and a willingness to adapt, maybe regulate their use as we learn more.
That sounds like a comprehensive approach. The sources also briefly mentioned things like Moore's law or Metcalfe's law. How do those fit in?
Right. Those are interesting because they aren't just technical observations. They function as frameworks, conceptual tools again, that help us understand and predict the behavior or value of specific technological tools. Moore's law, predicting the doubling of computing power, became this powerful driving principle in semiconductor development for decades. Metcalfe's law, about network value increasing exponentially with users, helps explain the power of things like the internet or social media platforms. Even simple calculations like productivity output divided by input, that's a fundamental conceptual tool for evaluating the efficiency of our tool use in business or economics. And frameworks like utilitarianism, trying to achieve the greatest good for the greatest number, can be seen as conceptual tools for attempting a kind of ethical calculus about tool use. Though the sources definitely acknowledge how incredibly difficult and uncertain it is to quantify complex human well-being like that.
Yeah, that calculus gets messy fast. And there's that fascinating final point the sources made about how gaining a really deep understanding of complex tools, whether it's physics or programming or the internet's infrastructure, it's hard to unsee it. It fundamentally changes your state of mind, how you perceive the world, how you interact with it. Like it's a permanent cognitive shift brought about by mastering a powerful conceptual or technical tool.
Absolutely. It restructures your thinking in a way. So ultimately, this whole phenomenon, human agency and adaptation through tool-mediated interaction, it's not just some historical curiosity. It is the ongoing story of humanity. Tools in all their infinite variety, physical and conceptual, are our means of engaging with that story, navigating challenges, expressing ourselves, connecting, shaping our reality.
And AI is just the latest, albeit incredibly powerful chapter in this incredibly long narrative of human tool use.
Yeah.
It offers immense potential, yes, to help us solve problems, maybe understand ourselves better, but it clearly brings significant challenges that demand really careful consideration, wise stewardship.
Yeah. The sources really leave us with a crucial task, I think. It's not just about building better tools, faster tools, more powerful tools. It's fundamentally about becoming better tool users. And that requires things like foresight, ethical awareness, empathy, and a real commitment to collaboration, working together for the benefit of everyone.
So, thinking about all this, considering how tools, physical or conceptual, shape every single aspect of your life, from your morning coffee cup to your deepest beliefs and how you connect with others, what tool, maybe one you use every day, are you going to look at just a little bit differently today after this conversation? Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.
This is DigitView.